Hello, hello. Welcome to episode 5 of the Inside Events podcast by Swapcard. I'm your host, Megan Powers, and my company is Powers of Marketing. In addition to being a podcaster, I am a marketer, providing strategy and execution, primarily in the meetings and event space with a strong focus on event technology. I do want to say off the top, if you have any feedback for us, our Twitter for this show is @the_event_profs. So follow us there and let us know if you have any input or feedback. My co-host today is industry friend, Elizabeth Glau. Welcome.
I'm so happy to be here.
Yay. Okay, so those of you who don't know, she and I co-hosted a podcast on marketing. I still have the show Making a Marketer, but she has left us after 2 wonderful years. But she's off to greener pastures and all that kind of good stuff. So she and I will chat news, and then she will help me interview our guest, Ben Wielgus, about sustainability in the meetings and events industry. He's with Informa. All right, I'm going to read your bio. Is this weird being the guest whose bio gets read?
I love it.
Awesome.
It's all about me.
Yeah. Rad. Okay. Elizabeth Glau brings 17 years of experience in the events industry with a decade of focus on event technology and innovation, and 5 years of experience in strategizing and implementing experience design. She is looking for ways to connect and elevate our industry by researching the future of work, employee experience, human-centered design, also called design thinking, and exponential organizations, EXO. And where's the best place for people to find you online?
So right now I've got a website up that's egcx.com, and that has links to all of the places online, because of course I try to be all of the places and do all of the things.
Of course.
So that one place is easy to find all of the things. So
awesome.
We'll just start there.
Yeah, and you're blessed with an unusual name as well too, so they can always just Google your name and all sorts of fun stuff will come up.
Totally. I have, it's funny that I have actually found other Elizabeth Glaus, surprising really? To me, right? But since I was the first one on all of the social platforms, I at least got my name,
yes, right.
Everything.
Yeah, so Elizabeth and I go back many years. She was my customer for a minute, and when she was a planner and I was selling audiovisual production.
For a minute. It feels like it.
Yeah, as members of Meeting Professionals International, the MPI San Diego chapter. She has since moved around, and now she is in just outside Portland, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right on.
Yep.
Okay, we're going to talk news. I thought that Elizabeth was the perfect person for this show because she has a huge heart for sustainability and for tech and for disruption and for everything and all of those kinds of things. And so the first article we're going to talk about it was from this week, actually. It was put out the day before the person called out in it, or the person who they were interviewing. It's an MPI article, Dispelling Common Experience Design Beliefs. And it was a preview of a session that actually got presented yesterday as we're recording this for the International Congress and Convention Association's annual Congress. It's going on in Houston right now. And this article was a precursor to the session that Timothy Simpson put on. He's Brand and Creative Engagement Chief Strategist. That's a great title. Brand and Creative Engagement Chief Strategist. That is a long title at Maritz Global Events. So he basically, it's interesting because he was going to be interviewing a panel of all of the sort of the heads of state, right, of all the major meeting associations. He said experience is less about the elements. It's looking at the journey, not just the design the journey, not just the destination. And then he also said, stop designing events without knowing guest preferences and understanding them as people. He said, doing so leads to foolish choices. So I find this really interesting as a conference for venues, basically, right? Like these are all convention centers and congress centers all over the world that are holding events. But I
Yeah,
think
that caught me that caught my attention too, because clearly it's targeting organizers still, but it is, yeah, this particular conference where this is going to be presented. But the thing I thought about it later was thinking that service businesses like hotels and venues have always understood human-centered design, even though they didn't call it that. So now you've got, more tech companies that you think of like they're making a product, right? But they're starting to use these frameworks such as service design, which is kind of what hotels and venues have always done, but again, didn't call it that. And now they're using those frameworks to understand how everything that they do impacts the experience that their customer has, and then how each piece behind the scenes is. So I'll give you a funny example, right? So if you ever worked in a hotel, or obviously if you're in our industry, you know that we call it front of house and back of house, right? Any kind of like hotel or restaurant or whatever. So the people that have developed this, service design framework call it, front of stage and back of stage.
Okay.
So you can, like you see the, the parallels, but yeah. So I think I think there's maybe a lot to learn from, the service businesses that are in our industry that we just have thought of as maybe completely different, types of businesses, but they know how to service the customer, and they know, and granted, some do a better job than others, right? But know how to connect the pieces behind the scenes, to better serve their customers.
Right. Well, and that just got me thinking that at first I thought, well, it's an interesting angle to get into this from, it being the venues, because this industry has been, we've been talking about this for a long time, about it, experience design, and well, not just that, but it being an experience, not an event.
Right.
But the interesting thing is that typically the venue is the first point of contact for an event. That's the first thing that an event organizer does, is pick their venue, typically, right? And it may be 3 years ahead or whatever. So I think it's really interesting if these venues can have staff that can be more proactive in helping these event organizers design the experience rather than just providing the venue. There's a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah, well, and in a perfect world, you've designed the experience you want your customer to have before you contract a venue. But as we know, if you've got a large enough conference, you have to book 3, 5, 10 years out, whatever, or it's like, or the opposite, right? There's no happy medium. Either you're booking 10 years out, or it's like your boss comes to you and is like, we need this event to happen in a month, right? And then you're just scrambling to like, okay, what's available, and forget any kind of, intentional event design and mapping the customer journey at that point, right? Like you're just throwing it all together, like making it happen. And so I would love to see, more of a shift where, we can be more intentional and, design that journey. But unfortunately, that, the planners that are in these positions, they just don't have that luxury. So I don't know, how do we, change that?
Right. Well, and let's talk a little bit about your role as, what was your title? Experience manager, or attendee experience manager?
Yeah, so it's funny, right? So when the last association I worked for, my title was attendee experience manager. So literally it was this kind of like idea of, customer experience, or whatever you want to call it, but it clearly was focused on a big conference, right? That's why it was attendee experience. And so I was getting this, this kind of experience. These words just become meaningless, right?
When we use them like
so many times and in so many different ways. So that's the other thing I'm learning now, is even outside of our industry, just in kind of the design world, if you will, they're all calling all these things something different. Like it means something different to different people. And so what I've been spending the last few months is just figuring out, like, okay, what does this mean to me, right? Like, what do I want to call this? Like, whose frameworks do I, like the best? But yeah, I mean, I was lucky enough to have a role for a few years with an association. They committed the resources, to looking at that, the customer journey. How are we better serving our vulnerable populations, within our event. And one of the things from the article he wrote about, what did he say here? The more insight we can gain prior to design, the more impactful we can be. He wrote, adding, we need to get beyond thinking we know our audience because we did a post-event survey. So, oh my God, like, don't even get me started on the post-event survey indicating whether the event was good. Like, oh my God. So at the association I was working for, like, that was one of the huge projects I did, was revamping the survey, but taking it at a completely different level. What is the data that you want to collect ultimately, and starting to move towards the idea of personalization. So what's the data I can collect on my attendees when they register, right? And then so design as best we can the event, and then we have the survey that then ties that data, like, okay, people who describe themselves as this, or this was their goal for attending the conference, they answered this survey question this way. And so you're able to get much richer data about who your people are and how different populations of your event experience the event, right? And so yes, I was super excited about that type of work. And I think it is an area that there's just huge opportunity, right? There's nothing but upside there, right? Like tons of work we can all do, big or small, in that area.
Right. Well, and hopefully we'll see you impacting that as you move forward in your career.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I did love doing that kind of work. So, potentially it is something I could do, do like contract work on.
Right. But I don't mean like as the person, I mean as as an influence, like industry wide, is to help disrupt. And I mean, and it shouldn't be considered disruption. But hey, on that, was the venue helpful with you, with helping you be honest but kind?
I'm trying to remember, any good example, good or bad. I don't know that we were working, this was a really large conference, right? This was 20,000 attendees, right? So we were limited to, and again, this is part of the problem, right? Is you're at that size, you're limited to really like a handful, maybe a dozen convention centers around the country. Like if you're limited to the US, right? And you're not going abroad. And so, it's some convention centers are better than others, right? We had a lot of other partners, helping us with the logistics, with the on-site piece as well. Actually, since this guy works for Maritz, I'll just say, we used Experience specifically, which is part of Maritz, and they would actually, somebody on their team would help us with a lot of the kind of dealing with the hotels to an extent, but the convention center and that kind of thing. So, yes and no, right? Like I tried to, again, influence where I could, where I thought we could improve that experience. But, sometimes, like, you have some wins and some losses, like,
like anything else. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully he sparked some interest in the attendees at ICCA World this week to do better. I think it's definitely a topic worth talking about. Okay, so moving on to the next. This is a skipped article that airlines care less about the environment than they will lead you to believe, which I thought was perfect. This just came out last week, given that we are talking about sustainability on the show today with our guest. And actually we have someone, Southwest was one of the only major airlines not mentioned in this article, which I find interesting. But at the South Coast EdCon is here in San Diego for MPI next week, and we have a speaker from Southwest talking about the airline industry, which I think is really neat, because I don't think we rarely get airline folks who get involved with our education conferences. So I'm excited about that.
They're always involved with, so when I was in Southern California, LABTA, so the Business Travel Association folks, they're always there. They're big players there.
Of course.
But no, with MPI and stuff, we never see them. So that's cool. I'm glad you get a different perspective there.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm a Southwest girl, so So
You're
I'm
a
like, okay.
fangirl.
You're gonna hand out drink tickets in your section? What?
Right? Oh, they might.
Okay, so basically it calls out the kind of the talk about doing for the earth, but really it's kind of a bottom line thing. And so I'm just going to give a couple of the quotes. And this guy from Spirit Airlines, used to be a Spirit, he's currently with Frontier Air. And it said, packing on Spartan and light seats reduces per passenger emissions, but this guy Biffle loved that strategy well before most travelers worried about sustainability because it saves money, right? Try to claim sustainability in the fact that you have 2 inches between, you know, your knees, if you're lucky, and the seat. And you know, this whole thing that these smaller airlines are like, you know, charging you for carrying on, and basically they're trying to reduce weight, right? And they're trying to fit as many people as they can so that they fly fewer flights, which will mean less emissions, but really then that means they make more money.
Right.
The bottom line.
Which is funny, like this all actually goes back to experience design, right?
Yes.
This is why we all hate flying.
Right.
Right? It is a freaking nightmare, basically, right? Like they have made it the absolute worst experience, you know, that they can. So yes, so a lot of so beyond, you know, airlines, a lot of companies will go green, quote unquote, or, you know, do like reduce their environmental impact if they find a way like that it'll save them money, right? They're not doing it because it's the right thing to do now.
Right.
And this is, you know, this term called greenwashing. We used to hear a lot of like more about this. Well, I used to hear more about this a long time ago. I think maybe some companies got called out for it, and so I think now they're a little bit more careful to just, you know, not just say that they're green, you know, unless they really can point to something specific that they did. I think now the marketers have just gotten better at taking a tiny little thing and being like, oh, look, like you were saying, like, oh, look at all these things we did to be green. And it's like, well, yeah but, you know, I don't know.
Well, so basically the crux of it are the airlines they're talking a big game. But each of them, each of their practices really is counter to it, and demand is up. And so as a consumer, you know, when demand goes up, prices can in theory go down. And so I don't know, they're filling demand, and so the environment's affected more and more. I guess, you know, there is like they're making incremental changes in terms of, you know, like there are some electric planes being built now, but those aren't going to go very far. And then you know, different kinds of gas that are, you know, that's better for the environment. One of the quotes from there, it says, for bigger change, we may need more government action. Germany is moving swiftly, substantially raising taxes, though long-haul carriers like Lufthansa will see far less tax on a percentage basis than short-haul airlines. France has also been planning to implement an eco-tax, and the EU may take action. So what do you think about this? Like, I think, you know, it made me think of flying in Europe. We used to take the train, right? But now it's so cheap to fly. So would you like, you know, take a fifth longer to get there and have it cost a fifth of the cost to fly instead of take the train? As a consumer, I know I do that.
Yeah. No, the low fares have definitely made it more accessible for people to, you know, travel by plane. And you know, I think I read a long time ago, there was a point, you know, when flying first started, it was only rich people that could afford to fly, right? And then it was at some point whatever shifted. I don't know all the, you know, the finances, you know, behind all this, but like at some point, you know, it became more, and as we've seen with these low cost airlines, you know, you know, flying is like taking a bus at this point, right? It's like pretty much like, you know, it's not a, you know, thing that only people with money can do. But on the regulation front, that's really interesting because, and that's great, you know, if Europe can create some change there and create some incentives, you know, that's awesome. I don't see us doing that here. I mean, honestly, we used to talk about this a lot back in the days of the Green Meetings Industry Council, there are other elements of events besides air travel that create huge environmental impact. And it kind of seemed like at some point, the government just wouldn't allow us, to do this anymore, but it hasn't happened yet. I mean,
Right.
that was, 10 years ago that we
Right,
were
right.
talking about that, and nothing's happened yet. So I don't
And
know.
we'll dig into that with Ben
Yeah.
in the second half. Yeah, Ryanair actually was called out specifically in the article. Basically, they went as far to say as you're actually, with those low fares, you're causing people to travel more. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not just
Oh,
like,
yeah,
oh, it's cheaper, so we're to get from here to there, but it's like, oh, it's
totally.
only $50 round trip, I'm gonna go there.
Right.
So
But then like there's a benefit, right, to the travel economy of the place that they're visiting or
correct.
whatever, right? So it's like, how
Big
do you weigh
picture.
all these things out, right?
Absolutely. Yes, yes. Well, okay. When we'll dig into that a little bit with Ben. All right. So that is it for news, and now we'll move on to our guest. Hello, and welcome to the second half of the Inside Events podcast by Swapcard. We want to welcome our guest today, Ben Wielgus with Informa. Welcome, Ben.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Nice to have you. I understand you're in London. We thought you were going to be in New York, but travel didn't happen. So thanks for joining us at this late hour there in
Yeah.
London.
Mm-hmm.
We appreciate it. Okay, so I'm going to read your bio and then we will dig right in. Ben has made a career of making sustainability a competitive differentiation for business. He's a dedicated sustainability professional working to make value creation for multiple stakeholders something that business wants to and can deliver. Ben previously spent 12 years with KPMG consulting on sustainability strategy in consumer goods, retail, banking, construction, government, and other areas. This built on experience across strategic commercial intelligence, business modeling, audit, transaction services, and integration advisory. He has a particular passion for taking the data and strategies from the sustainability agenda and turning them into stories that leadership support, those in business are inspired by, and in turn want to work with. Well, that's a lot. I appreciate the data. We talk data on this show quite a bit because that's kind of like what it boils down to, right? Like, how do you show? You can talk all you want about we're going to use LED lights and we're going to do this and we're going to do that, but like, show me, I think is the kind of the feeling that a lot of people have. And so I have a quick question for you both that I want you each to try to answer. I'm going to let Elizabeth go first. So Ben, you have a second to think about it. What is sustainability? I want to know, like, because people think, oh, like, we're not going to use straws anymore, plastic straws, and like what? So I kind of want to know, we're going to maybe not print programs anymore to whatever. So we know that our industry is responsible for a lot of waste. And so the movement on this front is super important. So Elizabeth, 3 sentences or less, what is sustainability to you?
Yeah, so during my time when I was involved with the Green Meetings Industry Council about 10 years ago, right, there were people in our industry talking about sustainability. Around that time, I came up with I was introduced to the concept of the 3 Ps. So people, planet, profit. So, for a business to be financially sustainable, right, you do have to make money, right, like to stay in business. So there is that definition of sustainability. Today, a lot of us think about sustainability as just environmental impact, but more and more we're starting to incorporate the people part of it as well, and making sure that you're making a good social impact. So that's the definition I've always liked, and I've kind of just carried that forward. But I know a lot of people have different definitions of it.
She didn't really follow the 3-sentence guideline now, did she, Ben?
Oops. I know, I was like, it's going to be 1 sentence. I'm going to tell you what but then of course I like babble on about it.
I have to describe what I'm going to say before I say it and then tell you what I said. All right.
Obviously.
All right, challenge. Ben, can you do better?
I could give you the 20-sentence version, which is my famous one, but we'll give you the short one.
Okay.
So the official definition that I really like is that sustainability is meeting the needs of today without compromising our ability to meet our future needs.
Ooh.
So, you know,
Ooh,
that,
I like that.
and the next generation need to think much longer term. And that's where the 3 Ps become so important that you talked about, Elizabeth, because if we do this just for profit, then we're not going to be good for our people or the planet. But if we just try and save the world without making sure we pay the bills at the end of the day, we'll all be sleeping out on the street. So balance is the key thing to me for sustainability.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. And that's actually in that Skipped article, we talked about, like, basically these airlines are talking the talk, like they're doing stuff, but really anything that they're doing that's helping them on the sustainability front was actually probably making them more money to begin with. And then they put a sustainable spin on it.
Yeah. But there's nothing wrong with making money from sustainability.
Right.
It's just about making sure we do it in the right way.
Absolutely. In fact, we talked about that on the news for you. If you want to go back and listen to episode 4, we talked a little bit about that and how there is profit. There is money to be made in low emissions, and so companies that are making moves towards that are going to be doing really well. Okay, so my first main question for you, Ben, is that Informa revamped how they approach sustainability a few years ago, maybe about the time they hired you, I'm guessing. And you all put out a sustainability report called The Role We Play. What would you say is the biggest impact the meetings and events industry has on the environment that we're trying to combat? And can you briefly summarize what the UN's Sustainable Development Goals are? I know I'm asking us to be brief, but we only have a half hour.
Okay, so in brief, Informa, like many of the people in the meetings industry, we exist to connect people with networks and knowledge so they can go on and make decisions. So more than the paper we use, the trade show waste that we create, even the carbon footprint, the most important thing we do in the world is help people learn more, know more, and do more with that. So actually, if we can stimulate people around sustainability and the value that comes from that, we can make the biggest impact on the environment and society and profits. And the Sustainable Development Goals are a brilliant way of talking about this. They are 17 goals that the UN and business have agreed that we should all aim for as a society by 2030. And these are all about fixing big problems in the world, but they estimate that it's going to take $12 trillion to do that. So people are going to need to meet to discuss how to fix these problems. They're going to need knowledge and information. They're going to need trade shows to find those solutions. So there's a fantastic business opportunity in addressing these big goals in the world. And we know that people want to get together to solve big problems, and we're the industry that can bring them together to do that.
Right.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good take on it. So Informa has acquired several companies over the years, including UBM, which dramatically changed the size of your company. So how do you maintain the same standards when you pick up a show and the planning's already in progress? Or you want to talk about, like, do you have different strategies for different shows depending on the audience, of that show, or are they pretty standard across your portfolio?
I like to think in terms of maturity spectrums. So certain industries, particularly things like the Natural Products Expo shows that came with us with the Penton acquisition, they are right at the heart of sustainability in the natural foods industry and the discussion on climate change. Other events in our portfolios are perhaps earlier in that journey, but are still helping industries with recruitment, more diverse workforces, training the next generation of talent. So each event tends to have its own strength. And what we started doing now, we've got to the size we are, is trying to bring in a standard approach to meet the expectation of a modern audience. We call that our Sustainable Event Management System, or ISEMS. And we've just rolled out 8 weeks ago 12 things we think every event should be doing to meet the needs of that audience. And we call that the fundamentals.
That's great. Yeah, I think it makes sense to have, some standards in place, but yeah, knowing that you've got, some shows that are leading the way in a lot of respects, right? Like, certainly don't hold them back.
Definitely. I mean, we have shows like Green Build, who partner with the US Green Building Council. They've always been incredibly successful at that green agenda. But we also have shows like the Game Developer Conference or Black Hat, which are really focused on bringing to light some of the taboo topics in the sector and helping create a conversation around them, such as dealing with stress or drug abuse or sexual harassment in the sector, and how to upskill people to move on from those and deal with them in an effective way. And they turn out to be some of our highest rated content, you know, helping the sustainability of the people who work in that industry.
Okay, so I have this is a big question, and I'm curious, what's the number one way that you think that Informa is making a difference in sustainability for the industry at large?
That is a big question. For our industry, in terms of meetings and events, I think one of the biggest ways that we can make a difference is by sending a really clear signal to our supply chain that this is the way we think the future of the industry is going, and we'd really like you to come with us. Because if between us, Emerald, Reed, and a few of the other players, we can all say this is how we'd like the future to be, it'll send a really strong investment signal to all of the supply chain, be it venues or general service contractors or other suppliers, to say, actually, you can invest in this stuff that makes more sustainable stands or more sustainable prints, and we'll buy it because we all say we want it. And that's where working together across the industry, I think, is so powerful.
Right. Yeah. I worked with Oracle on their Open World conference, and I know Paul Salinger. I'm sure you know Paul. Mm-hmm. And Jeff Chase is a good friend of mine too. So he really led the charge in basically forcing the city of San Francisco to make change and forcing the convention center to make change. So there is also great value, I think, in buyers with deep pockets to force it upon this convention centers and the areas that they're in.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't use the word force too often. We'd like to think it's collaborative, but one of the stories, if there's time to talk about it, is
yes, of course.
You mentioned Jeff Chase there. So last summer, Jeff Chase and I convened about 25 heads of sustainability from across the global events industry in an initiative we called CBIG, which was the Sustainable Events Big Industry Goals. And the idea was to get 25 people who are the biggest players in sustainability in the industry together in a room to talk about what the future of sustainability in our industry could be and what problems we could solve together that we couldn't solve individually. So that might be the problems of carpet or signage or materiality assessments or standard data flows. And that group actually now with several partners is about to launch its first project where several different partners are co-funding sustainable solutions together as an industry. And I think that's the first time we've ever been able to do that in this way.
That's amazing. Yeah, I saw Jeff at IMEX and I said, I thought you were retired. What are you doing here?
Jeff will never retire. He loves it too much.
Well,
that's awesome.
I was like, hey, I am having Ben on the show because you were already scheduled, and I was like, do you want to co-host with me? And he's like, oh, I don't. He's like, I don't think so. I go, oh, I do all the prep. You wouldn't even have to. He's like, yeah, okay. I mean, anything for you, Megan. But I could just tell he was like, not. He was a little too nervous to.
So you get me instead, Ben.
To do it. Yeah. Well, and I know, I knew you had your GMIC background. Speaking of that, is it defunct? Is GMIC no longer?
The EIC, the EIC, which was formerly known as CIC, took it over.
Oh.
Some years back. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's defunct in that it's not its own, separate thing anymore. But Mariella McElraith is kind of leading the charge there. And that actually leads right into the next question I had for you, Ben, which is about certifications. Are there any, they're trying to revamp the certification over there under the EIC. Are there any, like that one or others, that you think event organizers should pay attention to or learn more about?
Yeah, for us, there are three standards that we really care about. The first is the ISO 2012-1 standard that was developed by the Olympics in London, so one of the most sustainable Olympics in history. We have about 15 shows in Informa that are certified to that, mainly in Europe, because it tends to be stronger there. In the US, we're now trialing the new EIC standards, which were launched about a month ago for event organizers, and 3 of our events are going for the certification on that, working with Mariella as well. And then we have our own in-house system as well, which is probably quite similar to the EICs, which measures across our 5 different sustainability pillars. And that's a 40-point checklist to see how well shows are doing against our own standards as well.
Did you talk about your pillars, or did I read that in an article about you?
You read it, actually. I haven't talked about it.
Okay, so yeah, I know I saw it somewhere. So tell us more about the pillars.
Do tell.
Yeah, so there's a thing in sustainability called a materiality assessment, where you look at a whole bunch of issues, anywhere between 5 and 500, and you rank them based on what's most important. And for us, when we do that, we start to understand the priority of issues in our sector, and we've grouped those into 5 pillars. The most basic one, looking after the environment. We all depend on that natural planet to keep us going. We use natural resources. We want to eat food. And it's the one that the public most immediately care about. It's the one that investors first ask us about. Second up is our colleagues, because we need them to make sure we're a successful business, and we want to make sure they're engaged and enjoy their time here at Informa. Third is the communities we work in, and that's not really volunteering or charitable donations. You know, we do that really because our colleagues want to work for a business that cares about this. But recognizing that when we bring an event to town, we create jobs, we create prosperity, or we create congestion and pollution. So we can be a really good partner to the host cities if we focus on that. Those are the 3 traditional bits of sustainability. But the next 2 up that we think make the biggest difference in the world are the relationships we have with our customers and how we bring content to them, either on the trade show floor, in education sessions, in networking groups. But that ability of meeting professionals to help connect people with those networks of knowledge that we talked about earlier, I think that's the biggest difference we can make in the world. And therefore, that's our most important pillar, sits at the heart of everything we do.
Well, that's amazing. And so these are the things that your team is charged with thinking about as you approach every client relationship and event that you work on.
We try.
Yeah, I know it's a lot. It's a lot, but yeah.
It's part of it is that I think, particularly in the US, sustainability is so associated with green, and therefore often our relationships are most with the operations teams. And the step change we tried to make 3 years ago when I joined was to really start engaging with the marketing and content teams as well, and even the sales teams, to see if this is a way of building much stronger relationships with our attendees as well. Because we know attendees want us to be green, but actually more importantly, especially if they're paying money and time to be here, they want to know how they fix these big problems, whether it's about healthcare, whether it's about construction, whether it's about supporting artists. Everywhere you seem to go in the meetings industry, I find people have got a problem they're trying to deal with, and they come to our events or our meetings to figure out what the solution to that is.
Right. Well, you know what's interesting? We had on episode 2, we had Peter from Comics Posium on, and he mentioned how the difference, because I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about the difference between the US and Europe, and obviously there are many, but he said that a lot of the trade shows, generally speaking, in Europe have been more focused on the attendee and not as focused on the exhibitor, or and so I would think that also there would be a lot of opportunity there, right, to work with the exhibitors and those who are, I mean, attendees don't have to pay to attend, right? It's the money that's funding the for the most part, for the shows, the way that it works there, which is kind of the reverse of here. It's like, actually you have to pay for everything in the United States, generally speaking.
Yeah, I must admit, Jeff Chase at Freeman taught me a lot of what I know in the events industry, because I'm quite new in the industry. It's been a real education. And one thing I've started to realize is this very interesting tension between whether we focus on the exhibitor or whether we focus on the customer in the industry. And you know, getting that balance right is about long-term economic sustainability. We have events where it's largely funded by exhibitors. We have events where it's largely funded by attendees. We have our own Comic Exposium equivalent called Fan Expo. And I think in B2B world, we focus on the exhibitors to the extent of keeping them happy, even if the customers aren't having a great time. And that is not a sustainable show.
Right.
So we need to make sure that actually if the customers are happy and they're getting what they want and the exhibitors are playing a role in that, then everybody wins.
Right.
And this
And
again is,
I think I said Peter, I meant Simon Foster.
okay.
Yeah. Sorry. You, no, yeah. Apologies.
Do you want to redo that?
That happens. Yeah, but I think we're better served to like care about all of it, right? Care about
Yeah.
every one of them. Everyone matters.
Yeah. And I
Collaboration.
think the sort of the Fan Expo and the Comic-Con world is a fascinating one because it was built on the back of celebrity and on the back of buying the latest collectible. And that industry has radically changed over a decade. And now it's about a sense of community and a place people can and discover their passions and share them with others and find a real sense of belonging. And you know, if that creates social cohesion in the world, again, we're really helping with that people pillar that we talked about at the start.
Right. Absolutely. Okay, so we are sponsored by a technology company, and so I always have to add tech into the combo. So I wanted to I want to see if what you think is the best way that technology can play a part in reducing the carbon footprint.
So technology is so important. It's really something we're investing in heavily here in terms of how we engage with customers and how we speak. The first thing I think is that technology is going to bring solutions to digital meetings, which mean that we can talk in ways that are electronically enabled. We don't have to sit on a plane in a metal tube, breathing in other people's germs. We don't have to emit all that carbon. But we're also human beings and we want to meet
Exactly.
face to face. So I think what we'll find is that the quick meetings, the short visits, perhaps are going to die out. And instead what we'll have is lots more digital communication enabled by technology. But then the more focused festivalized events where everyone gets together for one big thing. And that could be how our industry helps save the world, is you can actually save carbon by having meetings all in one place at the same time, if we just focus it in one or two areas.
Right. Well, that would be like the South by Southwest of the world, right? Like it's music, it's tech, I mean, there are so many different things. So I like that idea. I would go to that.
Yeah. Yeah, because
Yeah.
it's really worth your time traveling to an event where you spend a week there and you do everything you need to do and you see everybody you need to see and you have a great time and you get your CPD points and everything else.
Yeah. Well, but having technology that helps you do it smarter,
Yeah.
in terms of, using AI to figure out who you need to meet with, and all of these kinds of really cool things that are available, using them correctly in ways, and educating our attendees too, right? To like download the app before you go, and to do that upfront work, because it really is a combination of the online and the offline that makes the magic when you do it, before, during, and after.
We've saved hundreds of thousands of dollars by reducing printing because now digital show guides are getting to a point where they actually do work quite well. We can find what we need. And then as we move into digital product libraries as well, I think we'll find they become the real future that saves us hundreds of thousands of dollars on many different shows.
Yeah, no question. No question. So do you have like one big hairy goal that you want to accomplish, that you want to do in this role?
So sorry, I'm laughing because I've literally spent 3 days of meetings talking about what we call our big, hairy, audacious goals.
Oh, that's awesome.
So much like the SDGs are aiming for 2030 goals, we find a lot of businesses are reaching their 2020 sustainability goals and now setting those 2030 goals. We hear about Unilever halving its plastic use. We hear about people going carbon neutral. And Informa will be making a few announcements in the next few months about what we're doing. But one of the things I think is incredibly exciting, particularly here in Europe, is we're helping educate exhibitors on how to eliminate disposable stands. For every disposable stand that we can stop an exhibitor using, so that's a stand that's only used once and then thrown away,
Right.
we save the equivalent of an entire household's annual trash here in the UK.
Wow.
So if we can get rid of 100 of those on a show, means we can build the show faster, it's cleaner. Most of the accidents happen on building disposable stands. So if we can get rid of those, again, people are safer. And we might even be able to have fewer move-in days, which means a much more efficient show. I think if we can set a big, hairy, audacious goal around really trying to reduce the number of disposable stands that are being built in the world, we'll have a huge impact on sustainability, but we'll also be operationally more efficient, we'll be more economically efficient, and everyone's going to be able to do trade shows much better.
Right.
That's
Well,
awesome. That's always been the best goal. But as you kind of laid out all the components of, I love that you found those other other reasons to do it besides just, that it's less of an impact. Because I think that helps you tell that story.
Yeah, it was really funny because when you first talk to exhibitors about this, you'll all know, and the people listening will know, a lot of exhibitors, especially in Europe and Asia, they want a custom stand because they think it'll be unique. But because they're all buying them out of catalogs, I've seen 7 stands in a row that are all identical because they bought the same page of the catalog. So we can do amazing things with modular stuff now, either with show ready or with the new cardboard booths. And there's no reason we shouldn't be able to promote this. And we found that a lot of exhibitors, their frustration on move-in is the fear of not being ready on time, or the fact that they're next to a booth which is still building, so their nice, newly cleaned booth ends up being filthy because someone's done some sanding next door to it. So I think by doing this, we can actually just move the industry forward and hopefully educate people that custom is not always better.
Right, for sure.
It's
or
amazing.
I mean, custom, yeah, reusable potentially. But I will say that Elizabeth and I both were involved with a tech startup, and that got the opportunity for the first 2 years to be in these innovation zones, or tech startup zones, which were turnkey, and I appreciated that so much. Just being able to show up and have the stand ready to go, I think is just, it's major, and obviously it was a lot less expensive as well too.
Yeah.
So there's that potential as well. So perfect. Well, I like it. And I like that the term big hairy goal wasn't like a weird American thing that I just sprung on you. That you guys actually really using that term.
I think I hang around with Americans often enough. I can translate.
Fabulous. Okay, well, believe it or not, that is time. And I can't even thank you enough, Ben, for taking the time to join us on the Inside Events podcast. Hopefully you will listen back and know that you did a great job of informing our listeners of what Informa is up to, and really what the industry should be thinking about in terms of sustainability, and to try not to just think of that word as the same old whatever you ever thought of it before. So
yeah, it was really, really good stuff. Thanks, Ben.
Yeah.
A pleasure to join you.
Awesome. And then thank you, Elizabeth, as well, for joining me like the old days here on a new show. So yeah, we're just 5 episodes in. So we are young, but have some great things planned. So I want to thank everyone for listening. This has been episode 5 of the Inside Events podcast by Swapcard, and we will catch you next time.